Okay, it is a schus and a pleasure for me to be here with Rabbi Lebowitz, who I asked him for 10 minutes of his time. So let's hope that we don't go past 10 minutes. It is Erev Yom Kippur. And the reason why we're here is because last year, before Yom Kippur, I shared a message or a speech that Steve Neuwirth, Olav Hashalom, gave the last Yom Kippur of his life in his home. And this was the perspective of somebody who was staring death in the face. And essentially what he shared was how someone in that situation can recognize life and see life without the distractions and without the clutter that takes up our mind. Rabbi Lebowitz last year messaged me after we sent out that message that this is the foundation for his Neilah drasha in shul. Then, fast forward a year later, I got a message from Rabbi Lebowitz and many others. Rabbi Lebowitz spoke about this topic and this concept at YU in a Sichas Moshe that he gave. And he spoke for the boys, and could be some Avrechim that were there as well. But I thought that it would be appropriate for Rabbi Lebowitz to come on and briefly share what he took out of this, what he shared with his shul, what he personally took away from this, and how perhaps he can inspire a few other people to, as they stand before HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the waning hours of Yom Kippur, they could transform their minds from clutter to clarity. Rabbi Lebowitz.
Thank you very much. I'm so eager and excited to be able to share this message that really I learned from Steve Neuwirth and from the email that you sent last year on Erev Yom Kippur. Typically, I don't open up so many emails, and I certainly don't read letters that are attached to emails and things like that. I don't know why HaKadosh Baruch Hu put it in my mind that this was going to be worth reading, but it certainly was. And it was an email about Steve Neuwirth, who was the original funder, I guess you could say, for All Daf. And when All Daf was an idea, and it was an idea that had to be sold to people, that people didn't necessarily see what the value is. There's enough Torah on the internet, and there's plenty out there in terms of...
Just I'll add, Steve Neuwirth, he was anonymous, and when he took it on, he didn't know or recognize or realize what it's going to be, what it's going to become, but he knew that he wanted to put his money into spreading Torah, and not just Torah on a low level. He wanted people to be able to grow and grow in Torah, as he was someone who grew up non-observant and just grew and grew and grew. And Rabbi Lebowitz will share a little bit more about what he was.
Yeah, and I was very moved. I believe you once told me that that although he was a very successful attorney, as the email had indicated, a very prominent attorney, but this was a major project, and it took a lot of money, the kind of money that people in a different stratosphere would typically take on. And it was a real push for him because Torah was that important to him. But particularly what you shared was his last Yom Kippur on this earth, and the speech that he gave in the special minyan that was made for him in his home on Yom Kippur. And I'm not going to read the whole speech. I'm not going to tell you the whole speech. I'll just tell you what hit me the hardest, what hit me the strongest from his speech, and what I did with it, and what I shared with the chevra in my shul and now with my talmidim. And I think it could be resonant for many others as well. He said that he doesn't want anyone to feel sorry for him, and that while he doesn't wish his illness on anybody, it was a debilitating, terrible, terrible illness. Through this illness, he said, Hashem in his greatness and mercy has rescued me. And the quote was, before I became ill, I had allowed my life to be filled with noise, distractions, and pressures, and focus on things that didn't matter. And he went on to describe how there was so much pressure, so many distractions, so much noise that was in his life, and the illness allowed him to focus on what was critical, on what was important. It allowed him, in his words, to remove the clutter that often fills our lives. And that's the opportunity that we all have on Yom Kippurim. On Yom Kippurim, there's no business, there's not even eating, there's no anything other than being Lefnei Hashem, standing in the presence of the Ribbono Shel Olam with that great sense of Gilu B'Ra'ada that one has when you stand in front of the Ribbono Shel Olam, a sense of joy and a sense of trepidation, and realizing that that's what's important in life. And it seems that that's an ideal time to make some decisions about one's life, when a person is not distracted by all of the clutter in our life, in our lives. So I encourage everyone, L'zecher Nishmas, Steve Neuwirth, try to think of an area in your life where there's clutter, where there's something benign. It could be. It doesn't even have to be something damaging, something harmful, something terrible, something benign. It's just clutter. It's just extra. It's just something that we do not need in our lives. And when you remove that from your life, you're opening up a window, because you're opening up a new window of time that clutter used to take up, a new space in your brain that clutter used to take up, and you can fill that space with something positive. You can fill that space with Kedusha. So after giving the speech, as a rabbi does, you give a speech, and then you go back to your seat, and I put my tallis over my head, and I thought about Steve, who I really only met once in my life. And then I thought to myself, okay, I just gave the speech, but where's the clutter in my life that I could remove? What's the value of talking about something if you can't live up to what you're talking about? So it occurred to me, and it wasn't that hard to find, that for a number of years I had been maintaining a Twitter account. Now, mind you, as far as I know, I never spoke a word of Lashon Hara or Rechilus on Twitter. I never put any inappropriate content on. I followed almost nobody on Twitter because I didn't want to clutter my Twitter feed with nonsense and with stupidity. But when you're doing that, you're fighting against the algorithm, meaning it's made to draw you in. It's built to be able to draw you in for extended periods of time, to keep you scrolling and to keep you reading. And even if you manage to avoid anything harmful or anything bad for your neshama when going through it, it's noise, it's clutter. And I said, you know what? Regardless of how many followers and how important the work I'm doing on Twitter is, or whatever, good things and inspiration I'm putting out there, it's clutter. So I went home that night, and before breaking my fast, I deleted my Twitter account. If you don't have any social media, this does not sound like a big sacrifice. If you do have social media, it probably does sound like a big sacrifice. But I deleted my Twitter account. And for months, that time, that space that was used for clutter, for nonsense, was empty. It just, I didn't, I could do anything during that time. And then a few months later, in another meeting with Rabbi Moshe Shwed, if I'm not mistaken, we were discussing all halacha. And would there be a possibility of some of the Magidei Shir from all Daf, or from all Mishnah, or from all Parsha, to maybe give a Mishnah Berurah Yomi Shir, a Dirshu Mishnah Berurah Shir? I thought to myself, how long could it take to give an Amud of Mishnah Berurah 5 times a week? Probably about 15 minutes a night, 5 times a week. Probably doesn't even take that much preparation to read through the Mishnah Berurah. So I said, you know what? I have this 15 minutes of space that was just cleared in my schedule a few months earlier, several months earlier. And essentially, I was able to turn Twitter into the Mishnah Berurah. It's amazing as a model of what a Jew can do. That you can, if you recognize the clutter for what it is, and you have a willingness in Yom Kippurim to remove some of that clutter from your life, to remove some of that nonsense from your life, you can add Kedusha into that space. It could even just be space in the brain. If a person is into whatever nonsense it is, a person is into sports, and they're thinking about their starting quarterback, why do you need to be thinking about your starting quarterback? If instead you could put into your brain each morning when you learn, and you learn the Daf Yomi, to take one thing, one shtickle Torah, one piece, one kasha, one something that you decide, I'm going to put in my brain today, and I'm going to walk around with that. And when I'm waiting online somewhere, or when I'm walking in the street, I'm going to think about that piece of Torah. And I'll tell you a good trick. When you get to my age, sometimes you have trouble sleeping at night. So when I was younger, never had trouble. But when you get to my age, you have some trouble sleeping at night. It's a great trick. Have that piece of Torah in your mind as you're trying to go to sleep at night. Just chazer it over and over and over again. And mimanav shach, it's going to be great, because either you'll chazer it over 1,000 times, or the Yetzer Hara is going to be so upset that you're thinking and learning, he's going to put you to sleep in no time. So I usually have the second thing happen to me, not the first. But either way, if a person takes that space, that brain space, that space of time, and removes the clutter from that space and fills it with some kedusha, fills it with something productive, you'll see that it could be absolutely life-changing. I think I hope to once again try to find another piece of clutter in my life to remove. Rabbi Shweda, I'm not committing to do Yerushalmi right now, but to hopefully remove some piece of clutter to be able to fill it with a little more kedusha. That's all we're supposed to do when we're with Hashem, to think of how to have just a little more kedusha in our lives, to fill some spaces with a little more kedusha, to be a little more connected to the Ribbon Shalom.
So we hit the 10-minute mark. So you're done with your speech. You could go. You could walk out the door. I want to end off by saying how hashgacha, everything has its time and its plan. And when Rabbi David Hafstadter reached out to me, he's like, who could I speak to? Who could I reach out to that I could start spreading this Mishnah Brura, Yomi platform? So Baruch Hashem, I think initially I spoke to Shai Shechter, right, who has a group of a bunch of Rabbanim when we got on. And Baruch Hashem, at least 4 or 5 of them have been learning with their shuls. Maybe you could just touch on and encourage people like myself, right, who are working most of the day, and we try to find spaces in our time, in our life, to learn Torah. How do you encourage, or what do you look at, Balabatim, finding space, and how should they fill those times with learning? And how about, do you think there are Balabatim out there that could, if they think about how they could help others learn, it would help their own learning? There are many, many capable Balabatim who've gone through yeshiva, and they just took a few minutes and thought, if I grab a few of my guys and learn 3 times a week or every morning after davening, whether there's a new Kitzur Shechanoch Yomi cycle starting, the Rabbi Shechter is very into Kitzur and pushes Kitzur. Maybe talk about that, and we'll wrap it up.
I think for Balabatim, for everybody, learning is much more appealing to people, and it's much more exciting to people when you're very actively participating. Meaning, to sit back and listen to a shiur is a great thing to do when you're on the train. It's a great thing to do when you're driving. It's a great thing to do every once in a while after you learn the sugya, to be able, or more than once in a while, to be able to get a good hekif of the sugya and to understand things. Real growth and learning happens when a person is actively involved. That could be b'chavrusa, and it could be by joining a chabura, where on some sort of rotation basis, people give. I found in my shul, and I spearheaded almost none of this. There are different balabatim that have spearheaded it. One in particular has spearheaded a number of these types of initiatives where people get together and they do on a rotation basis. After Shabbos morning davening, someone decided to start a Tanya Chabura. Now, we're not the most likely shul to have a Tanya Chabura, but every Shabbos it's a different guy that says the Tanya Chabura. And then that same fellow started a Sunday morning. What are you doing Sunday morning after the late minyan when the kids are in yeshiva already and you don't have work? So he started Sunday morning Gemara Sukkah shiur. So they started the goal should be about an amud every Sunday morning, total rotation basis. It's just, and people who thought that they could never, not only that they wouldn't be able to teach Gemara, that they don't even know how to learn Gemara, that people who aren't even into learning, they found that when you prepare and you try to enable yourself to have what to offer, to have what to give over to other people, that it becomes a very, very enriching experience. And sure enough, this chavra that's learning sukkah, they didn't make their first siyum yet, but they're well on their way, just by a Sunday, 45 minutes on a Sunday morning on a rotation basis without any rabbis having to really be involved, just getting together and sharing Torah with each other. Those are the kinds of things that are extremely successful.
Thank you. Okay, so it's Erev Yom Kippur. Wish you a Gemach Chasima Tova, and thank you. And I try to share with the people that are accessing the Old Torah platform that every tefillah that they have in mind for the success of the Magidei Shir, who spend time, just have that extra thought. People that want to spread Torah and they need to see after this right to spread Torah. So we're wishing everybody Gemach Chasima Tova and a good gebenched year, and we should have only a year of good news. That's all we need to say. Yimali Hashem kol b'shalus l'beinu l'teva. If you want to end off with a bracha to everybody.
Amen. Gemach Chasima Tova to everyone. Everyone should see a year of success personally, in Ruchnius and Gashmius and their own families, and that all of that success should spread to all of Klal Yisrael. We should hear of only good things for the Jewish people throughout the entire world, and Befrat in Eretz Yisrael, where obviously is where all of our future is, and we should see that Kodesh Baruch Hu is going to turn this year into a year of enormous bracha for Klal Yisrael.